from Berlin. I'm very excited to speak to you today. I'm very excited to follow Shah. That was a beautiful, beautiful start to the day. And I hope that many of the things that I will share in the next 20 minutes will really tie into how to tap into that history and that rich tapestry of experiences that are already in our field. So I'll be talking about, how we got far quickly as the digital service in Germany, but I'm hoping that many of these strategies will resonate when you are starting anything late. So let me start by asking you this. How do you actually feel when you're late to the game in something? So maybe you're joining a project which is already running. Maybe there's a lot of competition in the market you're entering. Do you feel stressed, under pressure, like you want to rush to results? Yeah, that's what we felt when the digital service was started in 2020. But let's start with some context. So Germany is really at the confluence of several factors that constrain the way that we deliver digital services. First of all, it has a large population. We're a large country. So some of the poster children of, digital government, like Estonia or Singapore, they're rather small. But Germany has 84 million people, so is rather similar to, or more similar to the US. Also similar to the US, we are a federation. So we have the local government level with a lot of municipalities. We have 16 federal states that wield a considerable amount of power in Germany. We have the one federal government, which you would interact with internationally probably. And then on top of that, we are part of the European Union. So that's like a fourth federal layer that comes to that tops off our marble cake. And we do have a very, very dark and unfortunate, horrible history to grapple with, right? There were two authoritarian regimes in the 20th century that really abused citizens' data to discriminate against them, to commit atrocities against them. So the level of consideration that is given to data security and privacy in Germany is very, very high. And maybe because of that, or maybe on top of that, we trail similarly sized economies significantly when it comes to digital government. So just to give you a little bit of an idea, within the OECD, we rank 26th, while being the fourth largest economy in the world. And the OECD has a really nice digital government index and also a digital toolkit, which will be linked in my resource list. We like using that framework because it's a very practical and just very applicable guide to thinking about how nations go digital. But to follow up to that, why is that? Well, only 50% of people even interact with authorities on the internet. So interact just means, going on a website or reading something online about a local authority. So in the Nordics, for example, which are much further ahead, that number would be somewhere in the 80s or 90s. And that might be because less than 10% of services are actually end-to-end digitized. So where you can start and finish online and you don't ever have to go to your local government office. Into that picture came the digital service. So in 2018, some very passionate folks, our founders, started fellowships. So fellowships, which you might know from the US as well, you have some of those and around the world, bring in people from the private sector, from nonprofits into the government for a limited amount of time to kind of share their knowledge and pass on some tools. So we started Tech for Germany and Work for Germany, which are two fellowships that were kind of started going in 2018. And they were doing so well that the German government, when thinking about a digital service, thought, well, actually, let's acquire this little company that's doing that, and let's use that as a nucleus for a digital service. And so in 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, the actual digital service as we are today was started as a subsidiary company of the government. So we are not a unit in government, we're a subsidiary company. And we were able to deliver our first digital services in 2021. So that's quite quickly. And there was some challenges that came to coming late, to coming into an existing ecosystem. So let me share those with you. First of all, it was really hard to get senior stakeholder attention, and you will know this from your project. If something has been already happening for a while, or if it's just not a fashionable topic anymore, people are not really likely to want to talk about it. Secondly, there's a really high frustration within the population in Germany with the state of public digital services. They are used to commercial digital services, to Amazon, to Apple, to Google. It works seamlessly. Why can't government be as they see these other providers? And finally, there's a very high complexity in the stakeholder landscape in Germany, which is really due to the fact that this ecosystem developed quite organically over a long period of time. So to give you an idea, this is our rough stakeholder landscape, but this is actually in the context of citizen-facing public services. And these are all the federal and local actors that participate in the digitization of public services in Germany. Maybe you've already spotted the little blue square. We've actually moved since that picture was made, but we sit at the federal level, and we develop digital solutions for and with the federal administration to hopefully make services work better for everyone. So I think key is also to keep in mind that we work at the federal level, we do not work at local or municipal level. So today I'm going to be starting talking about 3 themes that I clustered these strategies around when it comes to starting projects late or coming late to any game that you're participating in. And these 3 are, first of all, build on whatever you can to accelerate progress. And I'll give you some examples in a minute, but this will tie very, very much into what Shah was talking about, learning about the history of your field and figuring out what you can tap into. The second part is to balance your aspirations with whatever can be achieved now. And the third is to breathe and to really avoid that urge to rush, because it will not help. So let's start with building on whatever you can to accelerate progress. And actually, you can already see that within the founding story of Digital Service. We were, as a unit, repurposed from a company that was already running some programs within government. So rather than starting from scratch, we had a network, we had some knowledge to build on. But what else did we build on? Well, obviously, you know, from this conference here, there's a lot of folks, many folks around the world who know a ton about civic design. We've been doing this for a while. So shout out again to the Government Digital Service in the UK. We even repurposed one of their leadership. Our head of design, Martin, used to work for the Government Digital Service, and now he works for us. And this is a story that is shared around the world. So people move around, and then they can also share their knowledge. But beyond kind of the official Government Digital Service, whatever project it is, just take a minute to look online, to talk to folks and see what you can reuse in terms of open source or Creative Commons materials, because we live in an age where it's really amazing what you can find. Second point or example, you can really find a lot of infrastructure and technical foundations to build upon. So this is really, you know, digital service specific, and it's kind of technical, but whatever you're looking at in the landscape, just don't discard or don't assume that there's nothing there that you can build upon, but really think about what are the APIs or maybe technical foundations you can build upon. For us, the example is that we started very early to build some tax services. We actually built one for pensioners who were really underserved in terms of digital services. And we were able to launch that within 6 months because we plugged in to an existing API. And similarly in that project, another thing that really accelerated our progress was that we didn't kind of categorically dismiss whatever was already there. So our designers, our researchers looked around and, you know, there was already a form, a paper form, which you could sort of assume has nothing to do with digital services, but it had already done a lot of the work, actually most of the work of simplifying a tax declaration into stuff that's just relevant for pensioners. And so we were able to take that form and turn it into a digital service. Obviously, there was some work on top of that, but it really accelerated that progress. And so, you know, just because something is on paper don't automatically assume it's not relevant to you. A similar story we had regarding our legal information database that we're building right now, which is going to be really exciting because it's going to have an open API for folks to access norms and documentation of, court decisions and such. And there was already a lot of pre-work done by our partners in the ministry, and also around the different documentation offices. And they had thought for a really long time about a spec for this database, and why we didn't think that following a spec was necessarily the best way forward. And we ultimately negotiated our way out of that and opted for, another round of user research and an agile approach. We still used that spec as research. So, whatever you're pushing against or discarding, don't forget about it, but use it however you can. And then find communities or start your own. I guess I don't need to tell you about that since you're already here, which is a community space. And first of all, it's one that already exists, and one that is really relevant to you. But you might also find that you want to, branch out into something different, and then think about how you might build communities around your endeavors. So for us, that's our fellowships. Their initial purpose was not to build a community, but we found that the alumni really like staying in touch, and also with those alumni who work in government. And so that's a really, really great network for us to tap into when we need insights or when we, need to accelerate our work. Second point or theme is to balance your aspirations with what is achievable now. And that might sound a little damp or negative, but it's not meant like that. It's just meant to say you need to generate some quick wins in the beginning in order to kind of get going on your path towards bigger things and like the ultimate setup or plan that you have in mind. So speaking of quick wins, you really need to offer them to your stakeholders so they kind of start a conversation with you, right? So they're willing to work with you. You need to build this trust by showing them what you can deliver. So again, the example of the tax projects, the online service we did for pensioners was a rather small service. It doesn't have a really huge addressable market, but it helped us show that we can deliver stuff really quickly and really build functioning online services. And so this year, when there was a really big reform of property tax, and the ministry needed some quick results and needed a kind of a new development that had to happen quickly, they turned to us because they had already seen what we can do. And so, these quick wins will help you establish yourself. The second point is about meeting stakeholders where they are. And what I mean by that is not just the physical, even though the picture here is, of a physical meeting, that's important too, but also meeting them where they are in terms of language, in terms of prior knowledge. And this is really mostly towards those of us who maybe come from the tech bubble, like I do. I used to work in the private sector. You need to be mindful of what backgrounds folks might have. And just because you say agile and they seem to respond or understand, or you say user-centric, it doesn't mean that you're using it in the same way. Just make sure in the beginning that you get everyone on the same page and kind of explain to them what's going to be happening in the process. And then kind of these quick wins, think of them also as your unblockers or ways to generate, kind of to cascade your impact. So what I mean by that is look at the whole space of what you're doing. So that might be a user journey. This was the case for us. So look at the entire user journey and think about where are the blind spots or where are the points where lots of people get stuck, and get started on that quickly. So this is a picture of a letter that people get when they receive a new identity card, and it has a digital component. And this letter has been in place for a really long time, but folks didn't really understand what it says, and they didn't understand the relevance of it. So they often just threw it away, or they put it away somewhere they couldn't remember. And so then when they wanted to use their digital identity card they couldn't find the letter and they didn't have the PIN code. So that really blocked them at a very early stage from interacting with digital identity. So what we did is we tackled the letter first. And that had two effects. One, it unblocks, the entire user journey that comes after. But two, a letter is a great way to show iterative design process because it's super quick to mock up. You can do user testing on it. You can improve over the space of 1 or 2 months, and people already see the benefit of doing user participation. So it had like this dual function for us, and that we could also, excite our stakeholders for our process. Third theme, brief. I'll take a breath myself. Rushing will not help. And I think that this piece really was recontextualized a bit for me after listening to Shah's talk just now, because I guess when I was putting together this talk, I was mostly thinking about, oh, we're 8 years late because, some units started 10 years ago. But actually what you need to realize when you step back is people have been doing this for a really long time, and we are contributing a small piece into a larger initiative or a larger movement. And so that already helps you to not think about it as, oh, I'm late by 3 years. It just lets you think about it as I'm now here and I'm going to contribute the best way possible. But let me give you some specific examples. So first of all, you'll be really tempted to skip the basics. Don't do that. For us, this was user research and journey mapping. And this might seem very obvious and basic to you as a service designer, as a user experience designer. This is a tool you work with quite frequently. And also this is your mental model, right? You think about services as such, and you think about user journeys. Stakeholders in government, at least in Germany, don't tend to do that. They think about specific units within government that take care of individual points along this journey. And so just putting together this user journey allowed us to set up the project in a whole new way and, really discover those quick wins that I also talked about earlier. Second of all, kind of relax and open your mind to the problem in front of you. So in our case, there's so many references around the world of how problems have been solved that it's really easy to just rush into following someone else and kind of playing catch up. But your country, your local government, your municipality, your project is going to be different than those other projects. And so opening your mind to your specific challenge at hand, rather than just looking to the others, it's really going to help you find out what you can build upon, which was my first point. So for us, again, digital identity as an example, we have identity cards. For me, that's pretty normal. I've had an identity card since I was 18. Everybody has them, or most everybody has them. And they have a digital function, which really kind of had a bad rep in Germany because it wasn't used widely. The UX wasn't great. And so people were very quick to dismiss this. But when we spoke to folks from GDS, actually, they open our eyes to what an asset a card is, because we already have a way to identify everyone. We don't have to think about onboarding. We don't have to think about, pulling together bits of data. We can just use the identity card. That's beautiful. So having that insight helped us to really set that in place and say, okay, we're going to work with the card. So what other bottlenecks are there? And it turned out that these foundations are great, but the UX on top is what's lacking. So we can get much further, much more quickly than if we started from scratch. But that was really a journey for us to realize that. And so finally, I guess the lesson from that is also to learn from others and not compare yourself to them, because that's something we're all guilty of, right? Seeing someone and in a similar field and thinking, oh, wow, I didn't do that. I didn't say that. I didn't go to the school. In our case, oh, we haven't been around for 10 years. Well, actually, there's tons to learn from these folks. And so we participate in these exchanges really frequently. We speak to other units around the world. We speak to other units within Germany and try to, just pick apart what they've done and understand what we can apply to the German setting. So there are my 3 themes in terms of strategies when starting late. Building on wherever you can, balancing your aspirations with quick wins, and breathing. And this really helped us to achieve some, for us, significant things in 2 years. Have we solved German digitization? No, but we've built a really, really awesome team. We have become an attractive project partner. We've really managed to establish ourselves. We've launched working online services, which bring benefit to users. We've established a development environment, which lets us develop continuously, also not a given in Germany. And we've piloted a standardized contract, which is, something you don't really think about that much. So where do we go from here? We're really looking up the value chain right now. And Kara has mentioned some of this in her intro. Digital services are not just at the surface where users experience them. They actually are a result of a ton of backstage legislation, processes, and policy and stuff. So you can also think about it like this, in order to build a user-centered digital service, there's all these steps that need to happen before that, which start really with digital ready mindsets in the heads of our most senior stakeholders. And so right now we're looking up this value chain, and we're trying to figure out how we can help legislators think about digital outcomes as they are drafting new laws or new regulations. And we've done quite a bit of soul searching in the past 3 months or 4 months to figure out where we've come from and what are our foundations and quick wins that we can build upon. And, we've come from building prototypes and showing what's possible. We've gone through delivering digital services ourselves. So now we're ready to think about this in a grander frame of reference, and to really sit down with our stakeholders and think about where we can help to go next. So speaking of soul searching, what's next for you? Thank you.
Woohoo! If I can grab my mute button in time. Now, Magdalena, you have a lot of questions. We have just a few minutes.
Wow.
So I'm going to dive into the first one. Curious if you could go back and do anything differently in those early days of getting started. What would it be and why?
Wow, that's a really hard question. Should have seen that coming. You can second guess, I guess, a lot of decisions that were taken. We started quite opportunistically, so we took a lot of different projects in different areas and in different setups just to figure out what works and what doesn't. And we now know what doesn't work for us. So we assumed that we were going to do lots of quick MVPs and then hand them off to someone else. Didn't work. But would I necessarily not do that phase like that anymore? I don't think so, because I think it's still important to try stuff out and and make a decision. So just more, I guess, more building things. Whenever I'm stumped for an answer, I would say default to making something and prototyping and testing with users. We could have always done more of that.
Absolutely. What a great answer. Next question is there any advice on getting buy-in from other existing institutions? I feel like there's often ideal potential partners, but it requires persuasion. But it's also hard when those existing institutions are often overworked and under-resourced.
Wow, did we work in the same space? I guess so. Yeah, so you saw that image of all these actors in Germany. It's not just, I was thinking back to what Shah was saying. Many of those folks have actually doing a lot of hard work over the past year. So we obviously want to tap into that. And I guess a thick skin is really what you need, because you need to get through an initial phase of skepticism. And, some of these folks have been around for 10, 15, 20 years, especially from nonprofits, especially from like what we would call civil society in Germany. They have seen people come and go and, projects start and not go anywhere. And so when someone new comes along, they will always be like, yeah, whatever, just another one. But really show, don't tell. I think it's a principle we learned from the GDS. It is great. So don't let yourself be discouraged in those first meetings or in those first conversations. Also, don't shy away from these conversations. Don't wait too long to start them. Just go for it. anticipate that the first couple of are going to be difficult, and then try to understand their pains and deliver value to them as quickly as possible. I guess that's easier said than done, but we have had some success with this.
No, I think you laid it out very clearly. I thought it was a great answer. And it looks like the questions are just rolling in. So next is, are there other small decisions from the early days that have proven to be big and good decisions now?
So I talk a lot about the digital identity project just because I started out as a product lead on that project. So I have a very deep insight into that. So I'll just stick to that, mindful that there might be other bets that are out there. But for that specific project, we were actually approached to kind of polish up or touch up an existing app. And we didn't say no. We said, okay, let's do a compromise. We'll touch up your app, but we'll also do a ton of user research. And you'll pay for it, obviously. and they said, okay, fine. And that push, and this is why I emphasize this, don't skip the basics. You know, a lot of stakeholders were like, it's too late. We have a release planned for in 3 months. So there's no point doing user research. Actually, it's like 18 months later, and thank God we did that user research, because we have so much knowledge now that we can go off, and pushing for that really paid off.
Yeah, another great answer. I think you laid it out very clearly. That was great. So someone's asking to hear more about the fellowship program. They say, very cool idea.
Sure, of course. We love it. So we have two, Tech for Germany and Work for Germany, and Tech is the older one. And it's just, the idea is you do a 3-month sprint phase where someone from the civil service comes with a challenge that they're facing, and you put them together with a team of 4 fellows, 2 engineers, a designer, and a product manager, who come from, you know, from early career startups, tech companies, and they follow a kind of double diamond design thinking-ish inspired journey. But really the focus is on user research, user-centric design, and giving them an understanding of what that could look like, and prototyping. So it doesn't deliver final working services, it delivers prototypes, and it's more about the journey than the result. And then after that, we realized that actually there's also a need for kind of new work and management insights for more senior civil servants. So that's what Work for Germany tackles, and it takes 6 months. And we bring in folks who are, you know, a bit later in their careers, who have some experience in either management or coaching, and they are put into tandems with specific people inside the ministries, and they tackle something like a project, a theme in that department, which could be something like the onboarding process for new employees, which could be knowledge management, you know, all those things that we know from our companies and we struggle with. Departments, ministries have them too. So bringing in this industry knowledge, let's call it, and putting that where it needs to go. And yeah, we love them. They're very successful. We keep developing them and iterating on them and figuring out where they can go next. But we've scaled them now to 8 projects in Tech for Germany and 30 different fellows in Work for Germany just this year.
Man, an awesome answer. And we only have time for one more question, but you have a lot left in the chat. So when you get in a moment,
right.
Asking for an example of some quick wins. We're trying to find ways to keep momentum with a government partner, but hold them back from rushing.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Hold them back from rushing is a good one. Yeah. So the letter is my favorite example of a quick win. But I guess, okay, let me think about this for a minute. Just mapping can be a really quick win because it is helping folks see things differently. And I know it's not an output per se, like it's not a product you deliver, but just making a stakeholder, an ecosystem map, a service map. Sometimes, so these are really our most high valued artifacts that we produce in the project. So think about that. But then maybe an onboarding in an app we did as well, just to set folks up, set the users up. These kinds of things come to my mind, but I'll think about it some more and post it in Slack.
Yes, that's perfect. Magdalena, that was amazing. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, Magdalena.